The Pacific belongs to Japan. December 1941 through May 1942, 6 months of conquest that redraw the map of the world. Pearl Harbor smolders in ruins. Singapore, the fortress Britain swore could never fall, surrenders after 70 days of humiliation. The Philippines collapse. Guam falls. Wake Island drowns under the rising sun. Hong Kong, Borneo, the Dutch East Indies, all bent to Tokyo's will. 15 million square miles of ocean, now Japanese water. No empire in human history has ever expanded this fast, struck this hard, or shattered the illusion of Western invincibility so completely.
Tokyo erupts in celebration. Victory parades choke the streets as pilots who bombed Pearl Harbor march through crowds that scream themselves hoarse. Children wave flags until their arms ache. Newspapers print maps drenched in imperial red, and families frame them like religious icons. The carriers that delivered annihilation, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku, rest in harbor like coiled dragons, their flight decks gleaming, their crews worshipped as living gods. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto receives personal commendation from Emperor Hirohito himself in a ceremony that makes grown officers weep with pride.
But pride is a blindfold. In military headquarters, generals study maps and see only red ink spreading like blood in water. They count battleships destroyed at Pearl Harbor and declare victory inevitable. They mistake territory for security, speed for permanence. What they refuse to see haunts Yamamoto in his private quarters aboard the battleship Nagato. 3 American carriers escaped that December morning: Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga. Somewhere in the vast blue, they gather strength. And beyond them, America's industrial might stirs awake, a beast Japan has wounded but not killed.
The empire stands at its absolute peak. History teaches one brutal lesson about peaks. The only direction left is down. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto does not believe in half measures. The architect of Pearl Harbor knows the American carriers escaped his perfect trap, and that oversight gnaws at him like a wound that won't close. Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, 3 floating airfields prowling the Pacific, capable of striking Tokyo itself. He cannot sleep knowing they exist, cannot rest until they burn at the bottom of the ocean. So he designs another trap. One so brilliant, so irresistible that the Americans will have no choice but to sail directly into annihilation.
Operation M.I. The target, Midway Atoll, a tiny speck of coral 1,700 miles northwest of Hawaii. Strategically worthless by itself, but psychologically priceless. Midway sits close enough to Hawaii to threaten Pearl Harbor, and Yamamoto knows American admirals cannot ignore that threat. They will come. They must come. And when they do, the combined fleet will be waiting, with 4 fleet carriers, 2 light carriers, 11 battleships, and every advantage the gods of war can grant. In the operations room aboard his flagship Yamato, Yamamoto briefs his officers with the calm certainty of a mathematician solving an equation. The plan unfolds in phases. Invasion forces will approach Midway from the southwest, drawing American attention. Simultaneously, a diversionary strike will hit the Aleutian Islands to the north, splitting enemy focus. When the American carriers rush to defend Midway, and they will rush, Yamamoto insists, Nagumo's first air fleet will be positioned to ambush them. Superior numbers, superior position, superior pilots. The Americans will sail into a killing field and never leave. His officers nod. The plan is flawless. Victory is not hopeful, it is mathematical. What Yamamoto doesn't know, what none of them know, is that 8,000 miles away in a basement in Hawaii, American codebreakers have already read every word of his perfect plan. The Americans aren't coming to defend Midway. They're already waiting.
Operation MI is not a battle plan. It is a symphony of destruction, conducted across 3,000 miles of ocean, timed to the minute, designed to end American resistance in the Pacific with a single, devastating blow. Yamamoto's staff has spent weeks perfecting every detail, gaming every scenario, accounting for every variable. On paper, it is a masterpiece. In their minds, it is already won. The operation unfolds in 3 coordinated movements. First, a diversionary stripe on the Aleutian Islands, Kiska and Attu, frozen rocks in the North Pacific that matter to no one. 2 light carriers, Ryujo and Junyo, will bomb Dutch Harbor on June 3rd, pulling American attention north like a magician's flourish. While admirals in Pearl Harbor scramble to respond, the real assault begins 1,500 miles to the south. Vice Admiral Nagumo Juichi commands the striking force. 4 fleet carriers, packed with 248 aircraft, supported by battleships Haruna and Kirishima, heavy cruisers, destroyers, and oilers to keep the armada fed. They will approach Midway from the northwest, launch overwhelming airstrikes at dawn on June 4th, and obliterate the atoll's defenses, runways, hangars, fuel depots, everything. Midway will burn so completely that American carriers will have no choice but to respond.
And that is when the jaws close. Admiral Kondo Nobutake follows 800 miles behind with the main battle fleet. Battleships Kongo and Hei, more cruisers, more destroyers, a fortress of steel waiting in ambush. When the American carriers appear, and intelligence assures Tokyo they will appear, Nagumo's planes will catch them by surprise, crippled and desperate. If any survive the initial strike, Kondo's guns will finish them at point-blank range. No escape, no mercy, total annihilation. The invasion force itself, 12 troop transports carrying 5,000 soldiers, will secure Midway after the carriers are destroyed, turning the atoll into a Japanese stronghold that threatens Hawaii itself. The plan accounts for weather, fuel consumption, radio silence protocols, even alternate rendezvous points if storms scatter formations. Every detail has been wargamed, every contingency planned. But every assumption rests on one fatal belief, that American intelligence is blind, confused, and weeks behind. That belief is about to cost Japan the war. In Tokyo, Admiral Yamamoto sleeps soundly. His fleet operates under strict radio silence, communications reduced to brief encoded bursts that reveal nothing. Japanese naval intelligence assures him the Americans remain blind, their cryptanalysis efforts primitive at best. The element of surprise belongs entirely to Japan. This confidence is not arrogance. It is based on reports, assessments, and the unshakable belief that Japanese codes are mathematically unbreakable. 8,000 miles away, in the basement of the 14th Naval District headquarters in Pearl Harbor, a different reality unfolds. Commander Joseph Rochefort hasn't slept in 4 days.
His team of code breakers, mathematicians, linguists, chess champions turned naval officers, hunches over worksheets covered in intercepted Japanese transmissions. They call themselves Station Hypo, and they have been inside Japan's naval communications for months, reading messages almost as quickly as Tokyo sends them. The intercepts mention AF repeatedly, a target, something significant enough to mobilize the entire combined fleet. Rochefort's team narrows possibilities. Midway, Johnston Island, perhaps even Hawaii itself. But AF remains frustratingly ambiguous, and Admiral Nimitz demands certainty before committing his outnumbered carriers to battle. Rochefort devises a test so simple it borders on genius. He orders Midway's garrison to send an uncoded radio message reporting their water distillation plant has broken down. Within 48 hours, Japanese intelligence transmits an encrypted message to their fleet. AF is short on water. Confirmation: the target is Midway. More intercepts follow, each one peeling back another layer of Yamamoto's perfect plan. 4 carriers, invasion force, diversionary strike on the Aleutians, expected arrival early June. Rochefort's team reconstructs Operation MI with such precision they know ship names, commander assignments, even projected weather conditions. They hand Nimitz a roadmap to Japan's intentions, drawn in Tokyo's own ink. Admiral Nimitz makes his decision without hesitation. Enterprise and Hornet race back to Pearl Harbor from the South Pacific. Yorktown, damaged at Coral Sea and supposedly requiring months of repairs, gets 72 hours in dry dock before being shoved back to sea, patched but combat-ready. 3 carriers, not enough to win a fair fight, but enough if positioned perfectly. As Japan's fleet sails east in perfect formation, confident in their invisible approach, they are already walking into a trap of their own making.
Dawn breaks over the First Air Fleet, and aboard the carrier Akagi, Lieutenant Joichi Tominaga performs the ritual he has followed every morning since leaving Japan. He bows toward the east, toward the Emperor, toward the spirit of his ancestors. Around him, 200 pilots mirror the gesture in perfect silence. The flight deck smells of salt, aviation fuel, and the faint sweetness of rice from the galley below. Today is June 3rd. Tomorrow they strike Midway. Tomorrow they finish what Pearl Harbor began. The Akagi is more than a ship. She is a cathedral of Japanese naval power. Her flight deck stretches 260 meters, packed with Type 99 dive bombers and Zero fighters, each one meticulously maintained, armed, fueled to perfection. Below deck, mechanics work through the night, ensuring every engine purrs, every bomb rack functions flawlessly. Nothing is left to chance. This is not overconfidence. This is discipline refined over decades. A warrior culture poured into steel and aviation gasoline. In the ready rooms, pilots write letters they will never send, tucked into lockers alongside photographs of families they expect to see again. They joke about American pilots, untested, poorly trained, flying inferior aircraft. One flyer boasts he will personally shoot down 5 Americans before breakfast. His squadron mates laugh, not because the claim is absurd, but because they believe him. They have earned this certainty. 6 months of flawless victories have taught them the Americans cannot match Japanese skill, Japanese courage, Japanese determination.
Vice Admiral Nagumo reviews the strike plans one final time, satisfied. Radio silence remains unbroken. No enemy reconnaissance has spotted the fleet. Surprise is absolute.
His 4 carriers sail in perfect formation, surrounded by cruisers and destroyers, forming protective rings like petals around a flower. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. What they don't know, what they cannot know, is that their radio silence was broken weeks ago, and 3 American carriers are already waiting at Point Luck, positioned precisely where Japan will appear tomorrow morning. Vice Admiral Chuichi Negumo cannot sleep. He lies in his cabin aboard Akagi, listening to the ocean press against the hull, and feels the weight of command crushing his chest like physical pressure. Outside, his fleet sails in flawless formation toward Midway. Inside, something whispers that perfection is an illusion. Negumo is not Yamamoto. He does not possess the grand strategic vision, the gambling instinct, the willingness to bet everything on intuition. Negumo is a torpedo specialist promoted into carrier command, a cautious tactician suddenly responsible for the most powerful striking force ever assembled. He follows doctrine because doctrine has never failed him. He trusts his staff because his staff consists of the finest officers in the Imperial Navy. But trust and certainty are not the same thing, and tonight certainty eludes him.
The plan troubles him in ways he cannot articulate. Midway first, carriers second. This sequence violates every instinct he has developed. Doctrine demands you locate and destroy enemy carriers before anything else. Carriers are the threat. Carriers sink fleets. Yet Yamamoto's orders are explicit. Neutralize Midway's airbase, then deal with American carriers if they appear. The assumption, and Negumo hates assumptions, is that American carriers are days away, possibly still at Pearl Harbor, certainly not close enough to interfere with the initial assault. But what if they are close? What if intelligence is wrong? Negumo has asked these questions carefully, respectfully, and been reassured by men more senior, more confident, more certain than himself. Radio intercepts show no enemy activity. Reconnaissance reports nothing. The Americans are blind, divided, demoralized. Negumo wants to believe this, needs to believe it, but the ghost of doubt refuses to leave his cabin. He rises before dawn, splashes cold water on his face, and climbs to the bridge. His staff greets him with crisp salutes and confident smiles. The strike planes are being armed and fueled. Everything proceeds on schedule. Negumo gives the order to prepare the first wave, 108 aircraft aimed at Midway's runways and defenses. One decision, one moment of hesitation, one choice between doctrine and instinct. 5 minutes that will decide not just this battle, but the fate of the entire Pacific War. And Negumo, loyal officer that he is, chooses doctrine. 4:30 a.m., June 4th, 1942. The eastern horizon bleeds pale orange as Akagi turns into the wind. Flight deck crews scatter like disturbed ants as engines roar to life. First, the Zeros, then the dive bombers, finally the torpedo planes, each one loaded, fueled, ready to deliver devastation. Lieutenant Tominaga receives final confirmation from the bridge, salutes sharply, and climbs into his cockpit. Behind him, 107 aircraft wait in perfect formation, propellers spinning, creating a mechanical thunder that drowns out the ocean itself. Launch. One by one, they thunder down the deck and claw into the morning sky.
circling until the formation coalesces into an arrowhead of destruction aimed directly at Midway. Tominaga checks his instruments, confirms his squadron leaders are in position, and turns southwest. 240 nautical miles, 90 minutes at cruise speed, he imagines the American airbase below, runways, fuel tanks, command buildings, all about to become smoking craters.
6:15 a.m. Midway appears on the horizon, a tiny scratch of green against endless blue. Tominaga divs the signal. The formation splits, Zeros peeling off to strafe defensive positions, dive bombers rolling into near vertical descents, torpedo plants coming in low to smash hangars and parked aircraft. Anti-aircraft fire rises to meet them, black puffs of flak that bloom and dissipate like angry flowers, but Japanese pilots have faced worse. They press through, unleashing hell. Explosions rip across Midway's eastern island. Fuel depots erupt in orange fireballs that climb 300 feet into the air. Hangars collapse. A PBY Catalina disintegrates on its mooring. Runways crater under 500-pound bombs. Through his canopy, Tominaga watches the island transform into an inferno and feels the familiar satisfaction of a mission executed flawlessly. His radio crackles with pilot reports, runway destroyed, fuel depot burning, direct hit on command post, victory chatter, the sound of professionals doing what they do best. But Midway fights back harder than expected. Marine fighters, obsolete Brewster Buffaloes, and a handful of Wildcats swarm into the formation with suicidal aggression. Anti-aircraft fire remains intense, organized, deadly. Tominaga loses 3 planes before clearing the target area, more than anticipated. Worse, as he circles to assess damage, he sees movement on the runways, repair crews already filling craters, emergency vehicles racing toward fires. The airbase is hurt but not dead. He radios back to Nagumo, second strike necessary. The message arrives at 7 a.m. precisely as American torpedo bombers launched from Midway reach the Japanese fleet. And 300 miles to the northeast, completely undetected, Enterprise and Hornet launch Neuron strikes. The trap is closing.
10:24 a.m. Aboard Akagi, the flight deck is chaos. Mechanics swarm around aircraft being rearmed, bombs removed, torpedoes mounted, then changed again as contradictory orders ricochet through the chain of command. Strike Midway again, or prepare for enemy carriers? Nagumo has changed his mind twice in 30 minutes, and now the deck resembles a weapons depot more than a warship. Bombs lie stacked beside fueling hoses. Torpedoes rest on carts between parked aircraft. Aviation gasoline pools in small lakes across the deck. One spark could turn the entire ship into a floating bomb. The American torpedo attacks have just ended. Waves of obsolete devastators flying straight and slow, easy targets for Zero fighters and ship-based anti-aircraft guns. Japanese gunners have slaughtered them, shooting down 35 of 41 attackers without a single hit on any carrier. Officers congratulate each other. Sailors cheer. The Americans have thrown their best punch and accomplished nothing except their own annihilation. No one is looking up. No one sees the dive bombers. At 10:25 a.m., Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey's squadron from Enterprise rolls into attack dives from 14,000 feet, coming out of the sun, completely undetected. The Zeros are still at sea level, circling the wreckage of the torpedo bombers. The carriers are naked, exposed, their decks packed with armed and fueled aircraft.
Ensign Takayoshi Morinaga sees them first. 30 dark shapes plummeting straight down like thrown knives. He opens his mouth to scream a warning, but the first bomb hits before sound leaves his throat. Akagi's flight deck explodes. A 1,000-pound bomb penetrates the center elevator, detonates in the upper hangar, and ignites every armed aircraft, every fuel line, every stacked bomb waiting to be loaded. The secondary explosions come so fast they merge into one continuous roar. Fire rips through the ship's interior like a living creature, consuming oxygen, melting steel, incinerating men where they stand. 2 miles away, Kaga suffers the same fate. 4 direct hits in 2 minutes. Her flight deck becomes a lake of burning gasoline. Pilots trapped in ready rooms below pound on hatches that have warped shut from heat. Soryu takes 3 bombs amidships. Her engine rooms flood with smoke. Trapped crewmen choose between burning alive or drowning in the ocean. 3 carriers, Japan's finest, the sword and shield of the empire. All 3 transformed into floating funeral pyres in 5 minutes of perfect American execution. Survivors cling to debris in oil-slicked water, watching their ships, vessels they believed unsinkable, invincible, burn down to the waterline and slip beneath the Pacific. Vice Admiral Nagumo stands on Akagi's bridge, face blank with shock, unable to process what has just occurred. Around him, staff officers shout damage reports, relay desperate messages, attempt to restore order to absolute catastrophe. But order is gone. Control is gone. In 5 minutes, 300 seconds, Japan's dream of Pacific dominance has gone up in smoke, and the war they thought they were winning has just become the war they will lose. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands frozen on Akagi's bridge, watching his flagship die beneath his feet. Smoke pours from shattered elevator shafts. Flames climb the superstructure like vines, melting paint, buckling steel, consuming everything they touch. Below deck, magazines cook off in rhythmic explosions that shake the entire vessel. Men scream, high animal sounds that cut through the roar of fire and the wail of alarms. Some burn, some drown in compartments filling with seawater as damage control teams flood chambers to contain the inferno. Some simply vanish, vaporized by explosions too fast for human perception.
Nagumo cannot move. His staff officers shout damage reports that blend into incomprehensible noise. 3 carriers burning. Kaga listing to port, her crew abandoning ship. Soryu's hull glowing red-hot, ammunition detonating in cascading chains that ripple down her length. And Akagi, his Akagi, flagship of the Pearl Harbor strike, the most powerful warship in the Pacific, gutted from within, dying not from enemy shells but from her own bombs and fuel turned against her. Captain Taijiro Aoki grabs Nagumo's arm. "Admiral, we must transfer your flag. Akagi is lost." The words don't register. Lost. The concept is impossible. These ships were unsinkable. Their crews were invincible. 6 months of perfect victories had proven this beyond doubt. Yet here stands Nagumo, watching 3 carriers transformed into steel coffins in the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. A destroyer pulls alongside, her crew extending lines for evacuation. Staff officers physically guide Nagumo to the ladder, lower him down the hull still warm from internal fires. He descends mechanically, each rung a descent into nightmare. Around him, sailors cling to floating debris, their skin blackened, their hair burned away. Some call for help. Some simply float, already dead, kept upright by life jackets. The ocean reeks of burning oil and cooked flesh, a smell that will haunt survivors for the rest of their lives.
Aboard the cruiser Nagara, now serving as his temporary flagship, Nagumo finally speaks. How many? His voice is hollow, emptied of command. An aide consults preliminary reports. 2,000 men, perhaps more, gone in minutes. Pilots who survived the morning strike circle overhead with nowhere to land, their fuel gauges falling toward empty. Some ditch near destroyers. Others simply disappear into the Pacific when their engines quit. In Japanese naval culture, to lose one's ship is to lose one's soul. A captain is expected to go down with his vessel, not from Western romanticism, but from Bushido obligation. Yet Nagumo has been pulled from Akagi against every instinct, forced to live while his flagship burns. He stands on Nagara's bridge watching Akagi's death throes and understands with crushing clarity that he has not merely lost 3 carriers. He has lost Japan's future in the Pacific. The war is not over, but its outcome has just become inevitable. Japanese High Command faces an impossible crisis. The public has been promised victory. The Emperor has been assured of success. Admitting the truth would shatter national morale, undermine military authority, and expose the war's central planners to questions about competence. So Tokyo does what empires always do when facing disaster. It lies. Official releases claim the battle remains undecided. Newspapers print stories of heroic pilots sinking American battleships. Newsreels show edited footage of naval glory that bears no resemblance to the burning wreckage now settling to the ocean floor. Families of dead sailors receive no notification. Men are simply listed as missing or transferred. Some families don't learn their sons died until years after the war ends, if they ever learn at all. The censorship is absolute. No photographs of burning carriers appear in Japanese media. No survivor accounts reach the public. No admission of tactical failure, strategic miscalculation, or lost carriers penetrates the propaganda apparatus. The home front remains intentionally blind, fed a diet of lies so complete that most Japanese citizens genuinely believe their navy is winning.
But silence cannot suppress truth forever. News leaks through cracks, letters from officers, conversations between sailors on shore leave, intelligence flowing from neutral countries. A terrible understanding begins spreading through Japan's elite military circles. Midway was not a defeat. It was the beginning of the end. And worse news is coming. Far to the north, the American Navy's newest battleship, the Iowa-class USS Indiana, is already joining the Pacific Fleet, bringing with her a new chapter of American industrial power that Japan cannot match, cannot counter, and cannot survive. Japan never recovered from Midway, not militarily, not strategically, not psychologically. The battle was not the war's end. That would take 3 more years of grinding attrition across the Pacific. But it was the moment the outcome became certain. The sword that had conquered an empire in 6 months shattered on the anvil of American industrial capacity and tactical brilliance, and no amount of courage or sacrifice could forge it back together. Admiral Yamamoto knew this. In letters written in the weeks following Midway, he revealed a despair that contradicted all public pronouncements. "I fear we have awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve," he wrote,
echoing words he may have spoken years before when Japanese militarists first contemplated war with America. The invasion forces that were supposed to occupy Midway never left their transports. The victory parades that should have celebrated Japan's final dominance never materialized. Instead, Japanese admirals began calculating losses they could not replace. 4 fleet carriers, nearly 3,000 irreplaceable pilots, momentum that dissipated across the Pacific. Survivors returned to Japan marked by trauma. Pilots who escaped spoke in hollow voices about carriers burning, about friends vaporized by explosions, about watching the future incinerate in 5 minutes of American dive bombing. The national mythology of Japanese invincibility fractured. Mothers who had waved goodbye to sons at Pearl Harbor now received telegrams informing them of deaths at Midway. The collective consciousness shifted from triumph to dread. From that point forward, every battle was a retreat. Every victory was tactical and temporary. Every loss compounded the strategic reality that Japan could not win a war of attrition against an enemy whose factories never stopped producing ships, planes, and ammunition. The empire continued fighting. Islands fell one by one. Thousands more died. Years of suffering followed. But Midway had already decided the outcome. Japan had been invincible for one shining moment in 1942. After June 4th, they were simply a nation in decline, slowing their fall toward inevitable defeat. Japan's military leadership faced a terrible reckoning after Midway. Carriers were sunk, pilots were dead. The strategy that promised quick victory lay shattered across the ocean floor. But instead of confronting this reality, Tokyo turned to mythology. If carriers had failed, perhaps battleships would triumph. If tactical surprise was lost, perhaps overwhelming firepower could restore hope. Deep in the shipyards of Kure Yakansuka, a vessel was already under construction, the battleship Yamato. So massive that ordinary measurements seemed inadequate to describe her. 72,000 tons, 9 18-inch guns that fired shells weighing a ton each, armored plating thicker than any warship in history. To Japanese admirals desperate for symbols of invincibility after Midway's humiliation, Yamato represented redemption. A superweapon so powerful that it would restore Japan's mastery of the Pacific. They called her unsinkable. Admirals boasted she could single-handedly destroy any fleet. Officers swore that Yamato embodied the warrior spirit of Japan itself, forged in steel and pride. Propaganda posters showed her, gleaming hull cutting through azure seas, invulnerable and eternal. She became not merely a ship, but a national obsession, proof that Japan's industrial genius could overcome any setback, that Midway's defeat was merely temporary, that victory remained within reach. No one considered the possibility that battleships were already obsolete. No one questioned whether armor could stop aircraft that ruled the skies. No one imagined that 300 American planes would eventually hunt this unsinkable vessel into the depths. Yamato was born from ashes and delusion. Japan's desperate gamble that one more giant could restore an empire already in terminal decline.